Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And 11.0.5 is just around the corner, and there's a huge amount of changes, and I wanted to make a prediction tier list on where I foresee the specializations kind of resolving themselves in terms of power and potency in the solo shuffle ladder. It's always a really fun experiment, and then to go back and look at how accurate, how on the money was I with some of the power changes that came through. Do note when it comes to, meta in World of Warcraft that there is a lot of different combinations of talents and gearing that could potentially enable some of these specializations that are lower on ranking, potentially rising up into the future. So this is always like an ongoing process and assessment. And just because your spec comes in maybe at a lower ranking doesn't mean that you couldn't find a way to make it work that has just been undiscovered at this point, because there are so many variables to take into consideration. But let's get started. For Affliction Warlock, I definitely don't think Affliction is God tier anymore. I think that in the hands of the best players, it's a really solid specialization. But I would say that I think a fair assessment for it would be that it is still S tier. It can still do remarkable damage. It's got a bit better of survivability since the recent buffs before 11.0.5, but it's staying basically in the same spot is my expectation. Maybe it gets a bit weaker again, depending on the specializations that are good into it. Something like Beastmastery Hunter, which is actually getting stronger. So I think it's likely still going to remain in the same spot where it was. Arcane is getting big buffs with the Spell Slinger. It just got big buffs recently, and 11.0.5 is getting even bigger buffs. So I think Arcane is actually going to jump up a few notches. It's one of the least played specializations at the moment, but with the damage that I've seen coming through for Spell Slinger on the changes, I think that is likely going to change. So if you're interested in getting bored of Frost or something like that, this could be the time to really check out Arcane. I'm definitely going to be checking it out. I loved Arcane and Dragonflight, and it's just not felt rewarding enough in terms of how difficult it is to play for how much damage you get. But 11.0.5, I think that is likely to change. Arms Warrior, I'm sorry guys, but I don't think it's happening. I don't know if I should put you on B or C, honestly. I'm going to put you on C tier for right now. Survivability is just really low at the moment, and you're not really getting any love. And honestly, the damage is even kind of low as well. You're basically relying on just a Colossus Warrior Cheese one-shot with Demolish, and if you don't get it, you're probably going to die really fast. So yeah, the survivability is low there. Assassination Rogue, they're doing massive reworks to Rogue in particular, but I don't think Assassination is the one that's going to be completely overhauled like it is for Subtlety, or even in some cases Outlaw. I think Assassination is likely still just going to remain in a solid position. Main thing holding it back from being God tier is survivability. It's much like Warrior can be kited, and it doesn't have the same type of survivability, but its damage output is absolutely remarkable. It's really good. It's really solid still here moving into 11.0.5. Boomkin, this is the one that's getting a big update to its talent tree, but unfortunately none of it focuses around defense. So I'm excited to try out some of the new talents and builds and see how I can make them work, but my expectation is that due to its low survivability, it's probably still going to be very difficult to play and to do really well on, considering I think I'm still holding the number one spot at 2200. Of course, MMR is stifled, but other specializations are now pushing over 2400, so Balanced Druid might be a bit of a struggle. It's going to be for us dedicated few, I think, trying to make it work on this patch. Beastmastery Hunter is one that I could see potentially jumping up into God tier. With the changes that are coming through for the Dark Ranger, I think that you're going to have a tremendous amount of lethality through your Death Blow procs on your kill shots, which are now going to be converted into Black Arrows, and with all the buffs that came through to its throughput as well in that hero talent tree, and it's just baseline abilities, I'm going to do it. I'm tossing it up here. I think Beastmaster Hunter is going to be an absolute boss specialization for 11.0.5. Not going to talk too much about the tank specializations. Demonology Warlock, this is a tough one, honestly, to rank. I don't think it's terrible. Its survivability maybe is a bit lower. The pet AI can be annoying to get kited around. Actually, maybe it's not going to be that great, because Paladins, I'm expecting to kind of take over, at least Holy Paladins, and they have a lot of ways to completely counter your pets. Beastmaster Hunters have roots. Feral Druids have roots. I'm going to throw Demonology onto B tier for now. I think that the weaknesses of your pet and the liabilities of that, and your survivability not being superbly high, probably holds it at an average level. Destruction Warlock, I think, is a little bit ahead of Demonology just in terms of lethality and the amount of control you have towards ending a game. And we did see a little bit of emphasis shifted, but I think you're still going to play Hellcaller, so it might not matter too much for the Diabolist hero talent tree, but I think it's going to be in a decent spot where you can get some chunky burst damage out. But Affliction right now is just, I think its throughput's a little bit higher, and you can kind of get the same amount of burst from it in a lot of cases. So, and your damage is on the go. You can do quite a significant amount of damage while running, whereas Destruction, if you're not getting Chaos Bolts, your lethality is a lot lower. You can still get decent damage up, but lethality is a lot lower. Devastation Evoker, kind of tough to pin, but I think I'm going to toss it up here onto S tier. I don't think it's on God tier. I'm trying to think of why I don't think it's on God tier. And that's actually a very difficult thing to assess. And we're going to pull it above Affliction. But this one might move. It's just solid damage. Really good for a beginner player. You're going to see a lot of success on this regardless of skill level and specialization. It just has remarkable throughput. I don't really see that changing for 11.0.5. Discipline Priest. You're still really good. I'm going to put you up under the S tier for solo shuffle right now. I think that Paladin is, again, likely going to outshine you, not to kind of ruin that moment when we get to Holy Paladin, but I think that you're going to lose some throughput. Also, given the fact that Hunters are going to be really good, Paladins do really well into Hunters. So with that meta in mind, I think this Priest will still be really good. It has great throughput, awesome damage, solid healer. S tier is nothing to be, too unhappy with. Elemental Shaman, we're seeing the spec completely overhauled, and I'm a bit uncertain as to where to put this one. This is like the first specialization where I'm kind of stuck, because before I would have said that it was already A tier, and you would think with the changes coming through with it and its tankiness that it's probably going to S tier. And this is the Farseer Lava Burst build. I think is probably going to S tier. As far as the Lightning build with Tempest, I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm going to try and make it work with my Shaman. But you know what? I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. Because this is a prediction tier list. It could end up being really good. I think its damage output is still going to be really solid. Its defense is still really good, solid to begin with. So it's likely going to be pretty good here for S tier. Enhancement Shaman. Yeah. Tough ride, because most of the big changes, I think, came into the Stormbringer hero talent tree, and a lot of the Shamans are playing Totemic. So I don't know if the changes were 100% for Stormbringer going to bring it back up. I think the sprint proc that you get from mobility could be really cool. You got a bunch of visual updates. I think it's likely going to feel better than it was, so I'm going to put it onto A tier for right now. I still think it has some limitations to its specialization with being mobility, but it's probably slightly better. I'm interested to try it out. It has potential. Maybe it's going to be a bit higher, but for the purposes of this prediction, because I want to be right into the future when I look back at this, I'm going to keep it reserved a little bit about Enhancement Shaman. Feral Druid, on the other hand, we don't have to keep any reservations. This thing is not getting nerfed, so it's not going anywhere but the God tier. It is really tanky, really durable, instant regrowth, popping over 1.3 million, does remarkably high damage, can do spread pressure, can solo carry the game, has Cyclone. Really good time to be a Feral Druid right now, and I don't see that changing. Fire Mage. This is another really hard one, because it is getting some buffs towards the Frostfire Mage tree, getting a little bit of like a single target damage buff as well, and some talent buffs. It's probably going to feel slightly better, but it's still really fragile. So I think for me, B tier is probably a safer position at the moment to put it, even with my personal experiences playing Fire Mage now to about 2k rating. I think that it's probably still, especially with Hunter and Feral being as good as it is, and even Shaman, like Enhanced Ellie, BM Hunter, and Feral Druid, all your direct counters are getting like a lot of attention, and you got like a little bit more single target damage. You're probably going to feel about in a B tier position. But Frost Mage, on the other hand, you're getting a lot of damage from the Frostfire hero talent tree. You're getting even more. So I'm really tempted to put this onto God tier. The only reason that I'm not is because I think that all the Hunters are likely going to be difficult for you, and the Ferals and Shamans are going to be difficult for you. But you're definitely the best of the S tier. You're kind of taking back that spot that you had at the beginning of the season, almost, I think, with the increases in damage that you're getting. Frost Death Knight, we're seeing Deathbringer changes. Might be worth exploring if you're a Frost Death Knight, switching your hero talent tree over, but I don't know how much it's going to really improve your situation. We did see it pop up in the AWC. It's just such a niche specialization that requires certain synergies and communication with your allies to group enemies together that leads to you kind of like missing the mark on your burst windows. And if you don't kill in the window, then you struggle to get a kill at all. So for me, I think it's probably still going to feel kind of B tier, kind of mid. It's decently tanky. If you can line up the burst, I see it being threatening, but it's just hard to do in a solo queue environment with no coordination and comps that might not be most suited to you. Fury Warrior, I think that Fury Warrior is probably going to be at about the A tier. It's not super fantastic. You get kited way easier than a lot of other melee. You're also still kind of pretty squishy. No range damage. I think with Hunters being as good as they are, Mages as good as they are, you're going to not really be too happy as a Warrior, but I think your defense is maybe a little better than something like a Boomkin or a Fire Mage, and also just the stacking mortal wounds effect is really powerful for gaining momentum. So probably feel in a decent spot, but not like through the roof crazy. Guardian Hero put down here. Demon Hunter, I see this one popping up a little bit more and more and more, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of good. Like it gets close, but it gets out damaged by ferals. It looks a little bit squishy. It struggles with burst damage. Rogues are, I don't know honestly with rogues, so maybe it actually could be better indirectly just because we don't really know what's gonna happen with subtlety rogue with the rework that they applied to it. I think for me, Demon Hunter is just kind of mid at the moment. It's solid, but nothing about it is like standing out. It's probably tankier than, or less tanky than Frosty K, maybe just about the same amount of damage. Still has really good control, tons of different crowd control DRs as well. So it's got that baseline kit that can cause success, but we didn't see really a lot of attention to it. That makes me think that it's going to do, suddenly at the top of the ladder. Holy Priest, we haven't seen really anything from it. I'm going to put down here under the C tier. I think your mana is like the main problem. Every other healer just really outdoes you when it comes to that. Holy Paladin, this was an obvious one. God tier. You're getting really big buffs on this one. You're getting like stun reductions. You're getting auto sacrifices, auto freedoms. Like you already had the highest throughput, already had the best mana. You're getting like, yeah, if you're a Holy Paladin, you're very happy. I think with 11.0.5 on release here. Marksman Hunter, similar to Beast Mastery. With the reworks to Dark Ranger, you're going to be loving those. I think maybe the only trade-off is that you can't do your damage on the move like Beast Mastery Hunter. And, getting trained by double melee, it can be really difficult to actually get pressure out. Enemies can line of sight you. That's been my personal experience now getting 2100 on it in the current patch. It's still really good, but it definitely has limitations that I'm noticing. So I think for me, it's probably going to be S tier. I think the mobility of Beast Mastery is probably going to trump kind of some of the burst potential that Marksmanship has. So I think S tier is more fair position. And I'm trying to limit the amount of specs that I'm putting up on the God tier. But Mistweaver, this is a tough one because they took a bunch of your coolest spells away, like Thunder Focus T, or not Thunder Focus, Thunderous. I'm forgetting the name of it now. Something that gave you a ton of rolls basically because of Battleground Blitz, but they gave you damage. And so this is why like the potential of Mistweaver could be really high. This is kind of like, I should put like a mystery one, like, oh, who knows? It could be randomly really good. Because before I would have put it down with Holy Priest. But now with damage output, I'm going to put it on B tier to be safe. Because I still think it's really susceptible to crowd control. It's going to be weak to mages, weak to hunters, weak to the burst meta at its core. But it's probably better now that you can actually contribute some amount of damage. Outlaw Rogue, they removed some pain points in your DPS rotation. So when you're using Crack Shot with Between the Eyes, if you press it once your dance ends or your stealth window ends, it doesn't like go on cooldown forever, which is nice. But I think you're losing Shadow Step and you're getting 2 grappling hooks in exchange. So I think Outlaw's probably going to fall off a bit. It's going to have a harder time keeping up with some of these specs as far as mobility, but it's really tough to say because I like the quality of life improvements, but the mobility exchange could definitely hit it pretty hard. Preservation Evoker is still really good in solo shuffle. I'm going to put it up here with Discipline Priest. I think its main weakness is Subtlety Rogue and a well-coordinated Subtlety Rogue team, which is like unlikely to happen in solo shuffle. So it's just raw throughput is still very valuable. Prop Warrior, Prop Paladin, we're not going to really talk about, although Prop Paladin is a lot stronger. I don't know, but you only fight other Prop Paladins in shuffle, so I don't think it's really that big of a deal. Resto Shaman, I think it's probably still going to be a struggle bus. I wish that they found a way to enable you to do more damage. I would really like Farseer to make it so when you Riptide, it applies Flame Shock to a random enemy target. So that way you can just press Lava Burst. It's just you don't have the globals to keep up with applying the dot and then getting to the Lava Burst. And the Lava Burst procs seem really low from my experience playing Resto Shaman at around 2K in the last patch. So for me, I think it's significantly weaker than a lot of the other healers. So I'm going to put it down a tier on the A tier, but I do think it's a little better than possibly Mistweaver because of its crowd control avoidance. But also, it's hard to heal hunters and mages and devastation evokers because they move so much. So it's also just like the specs that you struggle to heal are very strong. So yeah, you're going to get a lot of situations that can be frustrating that hold you back. Resto Druid's probably going to be a lot better. You already had a decent amount of just kind of like passive ongoing damage, a lot of quality of life improvements, but then they countered those with like a bunch of nerfs on your overall throughput. So that made it harder to like pin in where Resto Druid is going to be. So I feel like it's probably safer to put Resto Druid at B tier for right now, but it could definitely have a lot of possibilities. This is one where I think I'm likely going to be wrong. Because it's just so impossible with this one. Ret Paladin, a little bit of a damage boost. You get a little bit of juice on this one. I think it's definitely going to feel okay. Maybe not remarkable. Probably somewhere in here with Fury Warrior. Still just really solid kit as long as you're using the whole kit and not pressing Sanctuary on your healer. looking at your Rets and Solo Shuffle right now that don't do it to my Resto Shaman. I think it's just got a really well-rounded kit, but limitations at the moment was kind of just like lethality. So a little damage bump, some interesting PvP talents as well with Eye for an Eye that I'm curious to see how they perform. Also, you do decently well into like Hunters and Rogues, which are likely to be prevalent. So you could likely have a decent spot, I think, just because of that nature. Ret Paladin will feel pretty solid. Shadow Priest is definitely going up onto the God tier. Basically, we're not seeing any real significant nerfs coming into the specialization. I'm still waiting for them to nerf the Void Leech on the hero talent tree for Void Weaver, because it's just doing an excessive amount of healing. It's basically falling into the category of healing, self-healing, that they said they didn't want to have in the game at the beginning of the expansion, that they kind of stripped away from a lot of specializations. And it seems like it kind of slipped through because no one was playing Void Weaver initially. They were all Archon, but then Void Weaver got buffed, everyone switched over, and then it was like, oh, hey, this is kind of a problem. And it's just doing too much passive healing, I think. If that got adjusted, it would definitely put it in a more balanced position. I think the PvP talent King of the Jungle for Feral Druid is another one it makes you move really fast. It makes you take 20% more healing. So it's like you can't get away from them, and they can't die with that currently stacked. So those are kind of like the main things. For Holy Paladin, it's just like a whole throughput thing. They just have crazy throughput on every single thing. Mana, healing, whatever it is. It's hard to take them down. Subtlety Rogue, we're ranking that last because that is literally the hardest thing to talk about. Survival Hunter, going to be decent, but probably feels still a bit weaker to BM and Marksman. It's kind of still just like a niche spec for those that are Survival Hunter enthusiasts. I think it's still good. I think it's still decently tanky compared to the classes in the B and the C tier. Still has really good overall raw damage. I think the limitations of just being a melee DPS. The inconveniences of it kind of getting stuck is the main reason it ends up falling a little bit flat in Solo Shuffle, as we see like range DPS tend to pile up at higher ranks and melee at lower ranks. So there's definitely a little bit of a favoring towards being ranged in that regard. Unholy DK, I'm sorry guys, but like you guys got crunched so hard, you're not getting no love. I do think that you've got to be better than Frost. So I'm going to toss you up here onto like the bottom of the A tier. I think you're still decently tanky. But main thing is just single target lethality. I would like to see some damage increases to Death Glow or something like that, but single target lethality is just kind of gone. So you gotta survive for a really long time in order to feel lethal in the specialization. But I don't think it's like god awful, Vengeance Demon Hunter, we're not going up to the tanks. Windwalker Monk could be really crazy. This is one where I want to put it onto god tier because you're getting really significant damage buffs on some of your baseline abilities, and you were already really tanky. I'm going to leave it on to S tier only because I think you can be kited as the main weakness relative to Feral Druid. Although you can be kited Feral. I just played the 2K, I think, maybe 2100 on Feral Druid and full Moonkin gear. And sometimes you can get kited as a Feral Druid. But I don't think I was playing the King of the Jungle PvP talent. I was still playing the Ferocious Bite one, and I didn't try it since switching that. I'll have to try it again. I'm doing the 2400 challenge. I'm going to try to get 2400 on as many specializations as I can in this season. That's going to be really hard considering there's literally like 3 people that have it right now, but we're going to try and do it again on my stream. Follow that. It's linked in the description down below. Augmentation is kind of underrated. It can crit really hard, has decent support, but I kind of feel like it's probably still kind of mid, so I'm going to put up here on the B tier. And finally, we've got the hardest specialization to rank, the one that I would have probably put onto S or God in a lot of these situations. I do think like coordinating your damage with your team can be difficult in Shuffle, although I think Peekaboo has like the highest win rate on Subtlety Rogue right now at the highest rating of the ladder. So if you can play it well and execute on it, you can get there. But it's not a spec for like a beginner. You're gonna see too much success as a beginner right out of the box with the Subtlety Rogue. It's gonna require a lot of dedication. But I think survivability going down, the cooldown reduction going down towards your abilities could be a problem. It could be a problem for you. So I'm kind of expecting Assassination to overtake it a bit. So I'm going to put it down onto A tier, but probably the highest of the A tier. It's another really tough one. I feel like Subtlety Rogue and Resto Druid are some of the hardest to call in terms of positioning right now with the changes that are coming through. But these are my general thoughts given my experience on the current patch and the changes that are now going to influence those classes moving forward. Hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. And as I said at the beginning of the video, you don't have to just chase the meta. I'm sure that there are things that are just waiting in the wings to be discovered on a lot of these specializations that could prop them up. And I feel like a lot of players have given up on trying to do that. They're just kind of like meta chasing, and I don't blame them, right? Because meta chasing can make things a lot easier for you in order order to get to your goals. But back in the day, there used to be a lot of players who would just seek that kind of like weird niche thing that could work. And if they found it, suddenly they became the meta. So I highly encourage you to still try and do that. Just because your spec is ranked lower on this tier list, don't let that discourage you from trying to find some opportunities with your specialization. And this one's a prediction, so it could be completely wrong in that sense as well. And it'll be really fun to look at it a week from now and see how right or wrong I was with it. So make sure to smash the subscribe button if you'd like to see that and stay up to date with World of Warcraft. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.